Okay, Terrell, go ahead with your two questions, please.
So, hi, Tom.
Hello, Terrell.
Hello. I have two questions. One of them probably have a sub questions too. It's about point consciousness. When probably it was when you were in a Bob's Monroe laboratory many years ago, first time you experienced, or probably at home, I don't know, the point of consciousness. When you first time felt it, jump into it or whatever, did you realize that you've been there before and you've been there many times? Did you remember that at that time? And when I'm going to sleep, like during the day, I'm pretty easily can go to that point of consciousness, or just close my eyes and visions change. I can see the auras and these kind of things. But when I go to the bed, I'm jumping to that state and I'm staying there for a long time and just, browsing there between that point of consciousness and in my room, like ceilings going up and down, corners going down to the top, I'm right there. And sometimes I'm not able to fall asleep. Things coming in, sometimes I'm able to hold them and go into them, but sometimes I even don't want it and I just want to go to sleep. Did you stop eating because of these things? Because what I realized, when I'm eating, it's hard to manage it. But when I don't eat, it's very easier to manage it. So this is a question about point consciousness.
Okay. The first one was when I first got to point consciousness, that I realized that I'd been there before. Sort of yes and no. I never called it point consciousness before. I didn't get it. I didn't get there in the same process. I didn't use the same process to get there, but yes, I'd been there before. Point consciousness is just the state you're in when you let go of all your sense data. When you let go of physical reality, okay, you let go of your five senses. You don't hear anything, you don't smell anything, you don't see anything, and so on. And when you don't have any sense data, then all you are is awareness in a black void. There's nothing there, nothing to see, nothing to hear, nothing to smell. You don't feel gravity. You don't feel like you're lying in a bed. You just feel like you're floating in total blackness. And generally, it's very nice. It's very pleasant because it's so quiet and so relaxing and feels very good. And yes, I did spend time just floating around there, just enjoying that feeling. And I played with that for probably many weeks, if not months, just going there and letting go and being a point of consciousness and nothing more. Eventually, I got a little bored with it, I guess, and I started to move on to do other things. But I played with it a pretty long time because it's a very nice state to be in, and it helps you make a real firm and steady state out of this point consciousness. If you can just get there and stay there for for an hour or 2 hours, and then come back, well, now you're building a really stable platform from which you can do a lot of other things. So I think that working with this point consciousness state, spending enough time there that it's a very familiar, very comfortable place, not just some spot you zip through, but a very comfortable place, probably was important to me, being able to go on past that point. But eventually, I did want to go on past that point because there's only so many times that you can just lay around floating in the void and and getting that deep relaxation. But yes, I did it, and I realized that that's the same state I had gotten into whenever I let go of my sensory data, which I had done as a child. I had done other times when I was just relaxing. The idea, that's actually the concept of meditation. Let go of all your thoughts. So you don't have any thoughts. Well, if you don't have any thoughts, then you don't have any sense data, because all your thoughts are about your sense data. I hear, I see, I smell, and those are all thoughts. And if you don't have thoughts, well, you don't have sense data. So it was a different process, because at the lab with Bob's, I got there through a process of emptying my mind and relaxation. That was the thing that Bob did. He put on this tape for us, and relax your toes, relax your feet, relax your legs, kind of a thing. Then let go to where you're not aware of them anymore, and then relax the next body part, and then let go. He had that kind of a process initially when we were just starting out there, until we get up to our head and our mind, and then you just let go, and then there wasn't anything else to let go of. You were then in point consciousness. And before, I had gotten to it actually much simpler. I just let go of it, and poof, I was there. And eventually, I let go of all that process of Bob's, and I didn't really need to go through all that relaxation stuff, so I stopped doing it, and I could just let go of the physical reality and find myself a point of consciousness, floating in a void. So it became easy and pretty much instantaneous, and I had done it since I was very young. So that's kind of that question. And let's see, remind me, the second question was related to that.
Food, eating the food. When did you stop eating, like eating less, not the meat, but I remember you said first you kind of stopped eating meat, but later you actually stopped eating and just drinking the cocktails, and that's it.
Well, I did do fasting, and I did it yearly. Every year I would do a fast, and my typical fast was 7 days, nothing but water. And I did that probably 10, 12 years in a row, every year. And the very first time I did it, I found there was a huge difference. A lot of little nagging physical problems that I had, from digestion issues to other things, even things like athlete's foot, and it all just disappeared during the first fast. All those little nagging things went away. And I was amazed by that, so I thought, well, I'll do this every year. But each time I did it, each time I had less of a change coming out of it, because I'd already gotten rid of the junk. Most of the junk was gone, and I didn't have those issues anymore. So there was less. I noticed less and less as far as my body changing it during the fast. But when I was fasting, yes, I found that getting to point consciousness and back mental states were particularly easy. But then eventually, even when I wasn't fasting, they were really easy too. So it didn't make that much difference. Early on, I noticed a bigger difference. It made it significantly easier. But like I say, 3 or 4 years later, I could get there on a full stomach. I could get there on a school bus full of kids. I could get there anytime I wanted to, and it was easy. I really didn't have much of a problem. So early on, yes, fasting clears the mind nicely. I think the way it clears the mind is it makes all of your all of those functions in your system that have to be in balance, like your blood sugar, has to be, it's just the right balance, and the system wants to keep it steady. And there's a lot of other things like that too. Most of the endocrine system is squirting hormones and other things into your system to try to keep systems in balance. And when you fast, after about the 3rd day of a 7-day fast, all of that stuff is just settled down and is very, very stable. your blood sugar isn't going up and down, you know, nothing else is going up and down. Everything's just kind of stopped, stable, right where it wants to be. And I think that's why things get easier, because
feelings become intense.
Pardon?
Your feelings become intense too.
Yeah, that's probably some. I didn't have a lot of intensity, extra intensity in my feelings, but maybe some. That's just because the mind is more capable. The mind is more clear. Whereas before you may have had those feelings, but they may have been muddier, you know, not as clear, not as sharp. And the clarity comes with the steadiness of your physical system. You know, it's the body. You know, the body sets constraints on what the consciousness can do with it, according to the rule set. So as long as your body is kind of flapping around some and is in motion, then there's a little, you know, those are constraints that the consciousness has. When the body is very even, then it doesn't have as many constraints. So are you practicing fasting?
I did practice for 14 days, around 6 months ago.
Yeah, 14 days, just water?
I even didn't drink a water. I didn't want to drink a water. I realized as less water I drink, as better it was easier without the water. I drink only when I felt like I need a water, but I didn't like have a bottle of water and drinking it all day.
Yeah. I did that just once. Most of the time when I did my 7-day fasts, I tried to drink water every day. I tried to drink like a quart of water at least every day. Whether I wanted it or not, I just drank it because I thought I was flushing, you know, crud out of my body. That's one of the ways your body eliminates stuff is, you know, it eliminates it in the water. So I wanted to give my body a place that it could,
That's a belief.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought, that it was getting rid, you know, so I was going to leave his channel open for taking the garbage out. So I did that. But one time I did, what was it? It was, I think it was 5 weeks altogether, 5 or 6 weeks worth of fasting. And I then didn't take water the first, I think it was 4 weeks, 20-some days. So the first 4 weeks, I didn't do any water, didn't do any food, didn't do anything. But I did go to work every day. I mean, my life didn't change any. I went to work. I still exercised. I still took long walks, you know, for exercise. I did that sort of thing. And eventually, when my kidneys started to ache, I started drinking water again. I thought, oh, that's maybe a sign I need to drink some water. Maybe another belief, but anyway. So then I drank a little water for another couple of weeks, and then I ended the fast. But that was more just an experiment. I wanted to see what would happen if I did that. And I had read a book, I can't remember the lady's name, who wrote a book called Living on Light. And she claimed that you didn't have to eat or drink anything at all. And after reading that book, I said, well, that's interesting. Let me try this and see what happens. I'm an experimentalist. I need to, if it's not my experience, it's not my truth. So I made an effort to do that. But I didn't just, that requires you to stop working, to sit, in a room, to meditate a lot, to stay in a mental space, for that to be successful. At least that's what she said in her book. I didn't have that kind of time that I could take out, off from work. My work was real busy and was consuming all my time at the time, and I needed that paycheck to pay the mortgage and get through life. So I couldn't take that time off from work. So I just kept working the whole time. I kept my mental state pretty calm, though. I kind of stayed in a meditation state, but not a deep one like she suggested. So it told me that had I done it the way she said, it probably would have worked the way she said. But I did it enough that I went for, trying to remember, I have it all written down someplace, but I went for like 4 or 5 weeks without the water. And I've read that you can only live 3 weeks without water. And I went past that without much of a problem. So I realized that there was something there that your body could do without, and it could do that in a rather dramatic way. But it's like everybody says, children, don't try to do this at home. It's not an experiment that you should take lightly. Like I say, I ended up with very painful kidneys, and I thought, well, maybe it's time to quit, because I wasn't really doing it the way she prescribed to do it. I was doing it while working, carrying on my life. Everything in my life just kept on chugging along as usual. So, yeah, I've tried it, but I never did it again. I learned what I wanted to learn from it, and I let it go after that. Yeah, that was enough.
To understand, to go there, you have to do it. Just understand on your being level. You did that.
Yes.
My second question is, I'm also experimental person, and when I've been experiencing this point of, all my life I knew that I have something what we call paranormal, but I never was interested in that because it wasn't the things that I would like to know about the people when I actually could do it just with going to that meditating state. I didn't know how, but it was always coming, the information. When I start to play with my consciousness, let's say this way, and experiencing this point of consciousness and out of body, different realities, and realizing what you are saying is completely probably the things what I'm experiencing too. That's why it gave me the belief that you're saying the right things. When someone, let's say someone got in a car accident and he's not able to walk anymore. If he has the intention to walk, some people do, some don't. If someone has an intention to walk, he will go to the therapist, or even at home, he will start to do the exercises. And what he's going to do, he's going to build up back his muscles, connect them, and be able to walk again, right? That's intention gave him the opportunity to walk. But during this time, while he'd been learning it, he learned many things about the life, but also if you ask him, how did you go back to work, back to walk? He would say, I don't know, it's just intention. But particularly, you can see that there is a process in his body was happening that he was able back to walk. While I've been experiencing all this consciousness, staying in this point of consciousness, through there shifting or seeing the auras and different kind of things, I realized there is things in our body that actually responsible for, let's say, for this digital connection, or there is something comes to our body, connects to it, and that gives the data to us. It's in our body. It's like, say, like an organ, and you have to start to work with that organ to be able to do that. You know what I mean? So while you've been experiencing entire this time and learning how to do it, have you realized it? Like, we're talking about fear and love, that's the key. But if we go biologically, what's happening biologically in our body, not the waves in our mind, but in a physical way, what's happening, what we have to do. Because when we go to the sleep, we don't feel many things. But when we go through this point of consciousness, you feel more things, and you realize why you didn't feel that before. You know what I mean? I hope I explained it in a proper way.
Well, I'm not sure what your question is, but let me just push around on it a little bit, and you can see if I'm getting there. The more aware you become with your mind, the more you grow up, the more you let go of the ego and the fear and the beliefs and all that sort of thing, then the more you understand the nature of reality and how it works. The more you understand your body, the more aware you are of how your body and everything else works together. You start to see reality not as just piece parts, but as one integrated thing of which everything's connected to everything else. And the body is connected with, the body responds to the consciousness. Now the body is an avatar. It's just a computed thing, but it has two roles. One, it expresses the rule set. It's computed according to a rule set, so the body can only do the things the rule set allows it to do. On the other hand, the consciousness, as it grows and changes, the body will change in ways to support that consciousness. So if the consciousness is understanding and becoming more, the body will have to change itself in order to support that. So I call that the consciousness leads, the body follows. So there's this two-way connection there between the body and the consciousness. One, the body represents the rule set, but that rule set can do all sorts of things. That maybe it has all sorts of possibilities. Let's put it that way. And as the consciousness grows and changes, that body still has to abide by the rule set, but it can modify itself within that rule set to meet the needs of the consciousness. And that can be both positive or negative. So let's say you have a person who worries a lot, and they worry and worry and worry, and they complain a lot, they're negative. Well, pretty soon, that body will change itself to suit that consciousness. It will become, say, it'll have low neurotransmitters. The brain function doesn't work some more. It begins to support depression rather than health. And it does that because the consciousness is that way. So again, you take a consciousness that is very upbeat and positive and happy, and even if you have a body that has, say, low serotonin or low neurotransmitters, eventually that'll start to fix itself. So the body changes according to the demands of the consciousness, but it has to only change within the rule set, pretty much, is its limit. Now, you can get beyond the rule set. You can break the rules sometimes, but usually that's just one-off. It's not something that's generally done, but individuals can break rule sets for specific reasons for certain lengths of time. But I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about in general, your body reflects the consciousness. The consciousness is limited and constrained by the body.
So you're doing the experiments, and who is participating in these experiments? Like, if you give to someone, if you say to government, this is the nature of our reality, this is who we are, and you tell him this is who we are, and you are the one who is experiencing it, for example, how are they going to believe in that? What kind of proof? Because I understand that I have to go and say this has to happen in your body, that you can able to do that, but you have to go through that, through your body. Did you do that to them, or you just say, and they have to go get over their fears and have them all up to be able to experience that and believe you? Or they have to go through the physical things in their body that you might told them, or didn't tell them, how they going to believe? For example, I can teach it to someone and tell him, hey, if you go this way, if you do this, and don't pay attention on that, it might help, and he might kind of experience it, for my child, for my friends, or whatever. But when you give to experiments and you talk to the scientists, this is what it is, how are you going to get them to believe? They won't be able to experience it.
Yes. You can't push anybody to be or do. You have to let them be and do themselves. So you can tell people. Pardon?
How they gonna believe you? Like how they gonna experience it?
They won't necessarily believe you. It's not really all that important that they believe you. You can tell people things, and if they are ready, they'll grasp it, and they'll go do it, and they'll make it part of their own experience. And then they won't believe you, they'll believe themselves because it's part of their experience. But you can't have anybody's experience for them, and you can't force them to be ready. All you can do is help them help themselves. So you can say, these things are possible, and here's a way that you can approach them. But after that, you have to let them do however they do it. And if they look at it and say, nah, that's just a bunch of baloney. Not true. I tried it for a day and it didn't work for me. Well, then you have to let it go. You can say, well, maybe a day wasn't long enough, but if they're not interested, they're not interested. Unless people are ready, you can't take them someplace they're not ready to go. So I don't try to get people to believe me. I just give people information they can use to experience things themselves, and if they choose not to use it, that's fine.
You gave the proposal to the scientists, for example.
Okay, you're talking about my quantum mechanics experiments that I'm doing?
Yeah, probably. You have so much knowledge about the nature of reality. You probably proposed it like information that hey, this is what it is. How they gonna experience it and not like believe, but agree with you that you are right. They can only do it based on their experience. For example, I believe it and I know what it is, but how they gonna do that?
Well, these quantum mechanics experiments I'm doing, they're just like any other experiment. They don't have to believe it or not believe it. The experiment will just work however it works. They'll put the experiment together and they'll have an input and out will come an output, and that's what the experiment does. Doesn't matter whether they believe it or care about it or anything else. Just it's a physical experiment. You drop a ball and it drops, and you can measure how long it takes to hit the ground. And anybody can do that. So these people that are doing these experiments are going to get all the equipment, they're going to put it together, they're going to perform the experiment, and they're going to report what happened. How did the experiment work out? And I'm going to take what happened, and I'm going to put it up on YouTube and tell everybody, well, here we did the experiment, and here's what happened. So it'll just be however it is. It's not a matter of getting anybody to believe anything. It's just the facts are the facts.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll be happy to report it however it goes, whether it goes the way I think it will or whether it goes the opposite way. I'll report it because it's good information that's valuable. I will learn something. If it goes differently than I think, I will learn something. If it goes the way I think, then other people will learn something. Well, I will too some. So you can't lose. It's a win-win. However it works out, it's going to be knowledge that this is how the reality works. And everybody will be able to use that and know a little better about the nature of reality. So I don't care whether anybody believes it or not. Belief isn't important in this experiment. This is not an experiment that you use your intent to make it come out a certain way. This is just a physical experiment. You just do it and it comes out however it does. And as long as the experiment's done properly, how it comes out tells you this is the way reality works.
Got it. Thank you, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
We have a new member to the Fireside Chat. One of his questions was asked last month, and it wasn't fully answered. So I'm sure that's due to my part in how I was reading it. So we invited him on the Fireside Chat to ask the question himself. So Gary, if you're ready to go ahead, please ask your question.
Hi there, Tom.
Hi.
Good to talk to you at last. I'm sorry I'm not on camera, having a few technical issues. Last month you described my question as being 15 to 20 questions in a row.
That happens sometimes, yeah.
When in fact I intended it to be just one question, which was framed in different ways to try to make it clear what I was asking. But unfortunately, the confusion that caused, you did not really answer my question. So thank you for inviting me onto the Fireside Chat to clarify what I meant.
Good, good.
Okay, so this bit is not the question. This is just setting the scene for the question, so it puts it in context.
Okay.
So I'll just read out what I've put down. Let us say that I perform some act of kindness, which is a joyful experience that makes me feel happy. According to the rule set of this virtual reality, this produces in my avatar a hit of neurotransmitters such as dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphins, which give me the feeling of happiness. At the same time, I'm aware that there is no physical avatar and there are no actual neurotransmitters, that it is all just information being exchanged between elements of consciousness. However, for the purpose of the example, we can accept that within the context of the VR, a physical, in inverted commas, process is going on. And furthermore, I also retain a memory of the event that caused this joyful experience to happen. The next day, my avatar suffers a terrible accident and is killed, and I find myself back in the non-physical, between lives. I no longer have an avatar to experience a hit of neurotransmitters, and also the memory that created that joyful experience in the first place is now fading and soon to be gone. According to MBT, what I do retain is the quality of happiness, or whatever other emotional qualities I am going to carry forward into my next lifetime. So this next bit is the actual question. So for that piece of information, which we are calling a quality of happiness, to be recorded in the IUOC, does it require a special type of coding which distinguishes it from a more mundane piece of information? After all, if one chunk of information is purely factual, such as a piece of the rule set, and this other piece of information is encoding the emotional quality of happiness or kindness, how does consciousness differentiate between the two? If the quality carried over to the next lifetime is a general memory of happiness, inverted commas again, isn't that nothing more than a totally neutral word without something specific springing to mind?
Okay. Let's go back to your examples, and I will use those as well to try to fish out some details here. If you do something that pleases you in the physical world, like go, do something that helps somebody, and you feel happy about that, you will produce some dopamine or some other chemical that will give you a sense of having done the right thing. You'll get a little plus for that. But you can do that in several ways. You can do all it requires to get that dopamine is for you to think that you have done something good. I think I've done something good here, so I feel good about it. And the feel good about it gives you the little squirt of dopamine. That doesn't necessarily happen at the being level. That can happen at the intellectual level. It can happen to where you are acting kind. So you say kindness is a good thing. I want to be more kind. So I am going to help people, and I am going to do kind things whenever I have the opportunity, because that's a better way to be. All of that is intellectual. And you'll see somebody in kindness, seeing somebody in need, and you'll go do some kindness for them, and you'll feel good about yourself. Look, I did something kind. I'm a good person. And you'll get a little squirt of dopamine. But all of that's coming out of the intellect, and it's not at the being level. And there's a big difference between acting kind and being kind. So you get this squirt of dopamine just for being pleased with yourself, for feeling good about yourself, which could just be ego, feeling good. I'm feeling good about me. I'm doing things that I think are important and wonderful, and you get a little squirt of dopamine. So if you happen to be a gangster and you just break somebody's knuckles and they give you their money, you may get a little squirt of dopamine for that says, okay, good day today. You've just stolen some money. So it doesn't have to be a good thing. It just has to please you to get your little squirt of dopamine. But it's not so easy after your avatar's dead, and now you're going to see whether or not you have gained anything from that as far as entropy reduction. That has to be something that changes you at the being level. So yes, there's a difference there between those things. It's not just about feeling good about yourself at that point. It's about, are you better? Are you a better person? You know, what's changed in you at the core? And that is what will lower your entropy, which then in the next incarnation will come in with a little better understanding. You'll start with a little lower entropy at the beginning for the next incarnation. So there's a difference there. There's a difference there. It's not a necessarily a parallel situation that you're talking about. You may actually be a very kind person, and well, I don't know. It depends on, you know, where you live and what you do and what your life is like. There may be only few instances where you actually have an opportunity to show that kindness. And you may not show a lot of kindness because there's just not a lot of people in need in your environment. Or you may be a person that has very little kindness as far as being, but wants to act kind, and you may do 2 or 3 kind things every day. So it's not the action that's important. It's the being level behind that action. So does that help clarify it a little?
No.
Okay.
I understand what you've just said. I've heard you say that many times. It's obviously the way I'm asking the question. I'll say it in a slightly different way.
Okay.
Like everything, you're saying that everything is information.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm asking, if there's no quality difference between one chunk of data and another chunk of data, so this chunk of data over on the left is a bit of the rule set, and this chunk of data over on the right is the bit of coding which describes this quality of kindness or happiness that I'm going to carry forward to my next lifetime. Those are 2 different types of information. You could say one is I suppose, an intellectual level, and the other one's a being level bit of data. You know, but it's all ones and zeros. So where exactly does the distinguishing factor exist between those 2 types of data? Is it in the innate ability of consciousness to be able to feel?
Well, yes.
There must be some difference in the data.
Right, it's very different. The data that describes what's going on in the virtual reality, that virtual squirt of dopamine or whatever, that's information about the rule set and how that rule set is producing results because of actions taken. So it's just a matter of you know, computing what the rule set does, and that's information. Now, when you talk about the information in the consciousness, okay, that's a little different. Consciousness, remember, came into this theory as an assumption. Consciousness was one of the assumptions. Consciousness exists. Consciousness is a self-changing system that is aware of itself and of its environment, and it is a self-modifying system. So it has free will. So we have all of that comes in as an assumption. Consciousness is kind of a unique element, and it's fundamentally different than the virtual reality. Consciousness is fundamental. You know, I say that's the only thing that's real. It's a real thing, and the virtual reality is just a computed thing. So consciousness, I model as an information system because that was the best way I could figure out how to model it. It is about information. What we're aware of, our awareness tends to be information. All the sense data is our awareness in this virtual reality. So our awareness can be seen as information, and our quality can be seen as information. But there is a difference between those two. The consciousness is an information system. Exactly how that quality is encoded, I don't know. Now you're taking my metaphors of consciousness as an information system to a level that I don't explain, because I don't have any explanation for the details of how that system, that consciousness system, information system, how it works to create the information that defines consciousness. To me, that's just part of that assumption that it does that without me really specifying exactly how that works. So I'd say, yes, consciousness is just a little different. It's the real thing. It's the fundamental thing. And all of stuff in the virtual reality is the computed thing that consciousness computes. Now, does that help?
Yeah, I guess it does, in as much as you've sort of said that that in a way is part of the assumption, its ability to feel. Because I was thinking, right at the digital Big Bang, consciousness existed as an awareness that was able to distinguish between this state and that state.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sort of a complex process of evolution followed that created this VR that we experience, and that makes sense. But did it have the ability to evolve from that process, or was that ability to feel present in consciousness right from the start?
Yes, consciousness, to be aware, it has to be aware of itself. And part of the way that it is aware of itself is how it feels.
Right. That helps.
Yeah. So that comes in. Yeah, you're asking, it's a very good question, but it gets down to the point that really, what is it about consciousness that makes it different from the virtual reality? And it is different, and it's not something I can specify, because exactly how consciousness, comes to being, or exactly how it internally works, isn't something that I know, or I'm not even convinced that it's knowable, because it's hard for us to get outside of that system to look at it in that kind of objective detail to come to those sorts of conclusions. Right. So because we are consciousness, I just lump that all in together with the assumption that consciousness exists, and then take it from there. So consciousness has these attributes, and that it's aware of itself, and feeling is part of that awareness. Then that's where I start. I don't derive that, so I can't really pick it apart into the details of what's inside.
Fair enough. Okay. Have I got time to ask my second question, Donna? Yeah. Okay. My second question is on free will. I would imagine you've probably heard of Sam Harris, who is famous for his view that free will does not exist. And he makes some very plausible arguments to support his view. Mm-hmm. My interpretation of the main point he makes is that at the very cutting edge of time, the very nanosecond of the next delta t, it's at that point that he should be able to exert his free will and choose what to think next. But his experience is that thoughts just pop into his mind as if from nowhere, and he was not the author of them. He illustrates this by asking the question, what is the next thought that is going to appear in your mind? If you can't choose what it is going to be, where exactly is your free will? He says it is more like we are receivers of thoughts and they just randomly appear. And it's not that the case that he has no control of his monkey mind. He is a very experienced meditator. But his personal observation is that when he quietly watches his calm mind to see what it is going to produce next, he cannot choose what it will be, because to do so, he would have to think the thought before he had thought it, which is clearly absurd. So what would you say to Sam Harris to help him to realize why his thoughts appear as if from nowhere, and to demonstrate how he is misunderstanding the concept of free will?
All right. His misunderstanding is that is taking his intellect, which is him wanting to place the next thought in his mind, and he is wanting his intellect then to program consciousness. And it doesn't work that way. Again, consciousness is more fundamental than just the intellect. The intellect's just a piece of it, and it's not even the largest piece. It's not even the most important piece. It's just one piece of mind as an intellect. But we in the West tend to come to the conclusion that intellect is mind, is what consciousness is about. That intellect and consciousness are kind of the same thing. If you have an intellect and you can think and you can analyze and you can judge, then you're conscious. And if not, then you're not. So we have this confusion between our intellect and our consciousness. Intellect's a subset. There's another part of your consciousness that's the intuitive part. And that intuitive part just happens. It does. It is, if you will. It is not intellectual. It's not pre-planned. And the intellect doesn't own it or, make it dance. The intellect's not in charge of it. It's another whole part of our mind that works in an entirely different way. So I'd say that is the root of his confusion, thinking that his intellect is his consciousness and is his mind, and therefore he wants to be able to control it with his intellect, and it doesn't work. There's another part of him that's also there that is more at the root and more fundamental, and he's missing that. Now, he and others have done lots of tests where they have shown, where they claim to show that there's no free will, and I think it leads down to the same thing. It has to do with this timing. And they will, this is not their experiment, but this is just kind of an analog. It's just a short analog of it. It's like when the bell rings, raise your hand. So they have a random number generator that will just randomly ring a bell. And everybody in the audience is supposed to raise their hand when the bell rings. And what they'll find, if they look at the tiny little micro potentials that are deep into the muscle, they'll find that those potentials start to energize in the process of moving the hand before the bell rings. And the idea is that, well, if the arm starts to move before the bell's even rung, then obviously there can't be any free will, because the body's moving without the mind ever having experienced the bell. So they use that as a similar example. And that goes way back to the 1950s or 60s when a gentleman whose last name was, I think it was Ben, L-E-B-E-T. French, that would be Lebet. Otherwise, it would be Lebet. I don't know his origin, but in any case, he did some experiments that were along that line, and other people have duplicated them. Recently, we've had people, show video or show pictures of horrific things, and before the picture is even selected by a random generator, the body already starts to respond to that horrific picture. And it responds differently if the picture is something that's nice and then if something's awful. So they see the body responding even before the random number has picked the picture, which then, of course, is a horrific picture, and the body's already started to adjust for that response. Well, the reason that works the way it does is that our body is a slow electromechanical device. Consciousness is very fast. In this virtual reality with avatars, with slow electromechanical systems, there is a problem with video lag. There's a problem with reaction time, with getting that slow system up and moving in time to have a reasonably short reaction time that we can do things like drive cars or fly airplanes or that sort of thing that requires faster reaction times. And in order to get rid of that, what happens is that the system starts that clunky electromechanical body going before the event, just to reduce video lag. And it does that based on the future probable database. It looks and says, well, what's likely to happen? And because it's a virtual reality, it knows what that random generator is going to pick and what picture will come up. And it's aware of all of that because it's computing all of that. It's a virtual computer, and it's a virtual picture, and it's all in virtual space, which it's computing anyway. So it knows all those answers, and it starts that body going so that the picture comes up, and there isn't this long pause before the body reacts to it. Otherwise, we'd be very limited in the kind of things we could do with these avatars. So that's kind of the answer for those sorts of things. But I think the confusion is that the intellect is consciousness. The intellect is not consciousness. Even your own little chunk of consciousness, your free will awareness unit, is not consciousness. It's just it's a subset of a subset of consciousness. So when we talk about consciousness, we have to talk about it at several levels. There's consciousness that is, the larger consciousness system. Then there's the subset of that, which is the individuated unit of consciousness. And then there's a partition of that breaks off a subset of that, which is what a human would call their consciousness. Okay. Now that consciousness is the thing logged on to the virtual reality, so it has some data being sent to it, and that the computer sends to the avatar to reduce video lag, and there's other things going on just with that free will awareness unit that isn't really indicative of consciousness in general. So do all of those things help you with that explanation?
Yes, they do. Thank you very much, Tom. Yeah, I'd love Sam Harris to hear all that. That would be interesting to see how he would react to that.
Yeah, and I understand where LeBay and Harris come from. I mean, they're looking at it, and they have opinions, or they have beliefs. They have belief that their own intellectual awareness defines their consciousness.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't. There's a lot more to it. It's interesting to look at the intuitive side, because the two sides are very complementary. We only develop the intellectual side in our culture. The other side, we even deny that it exists for the most part, but we know that it does. The intuitive side is there. Obviously, it is. All the paranormal things all happen on the intuitive side. Besides just normal intuition happens there. All the feelings, all the emotional stuff, comes out of the intuitive side. Doesn't come out of the intellectual side. It's all it all's on the intuitive side. So you have this intuitive side, and it has the properties that it has access to very, very precise and accurate data on almost everything, because all of those databases that I talk about are all accessible from this intuitive side. But it has a very problematic process. And the process is, for the consciousness to retrieve it, it has to be in a calm state. It can't be thinking of other things. It needs to, have some experience with altered states in order to get there. So we have all of this process that has a lot, that's very changeable. A person's mood, what a person's thinking, how much things on a person's mind, all this changes from time to time. So there's this process of getting the intuitive information has a lot of uncertainty in it. But it's connected to a database that is wonderfully complete. On the other hand, the intellect is a very precise process. It's called logic. Very precise process. But it almost never has enough data to produce a deductive conclusion. The intellect always has just pieces of data here and there for, except for the most trivial situations. It has 10%, 1%, 3% of the data. Should I marry this woman or not? Well, there's just not enough data to tell that, because you don't have future probabilities. You don't know what's going to happen or who's going to do what next. You just don't know. So the intellect is always guessing. You have this precise tool with very ratty information, whereas on the intuitive side, you have this precise information and a ratty tool. But between the two of them, they can make a whole person much smarter and much more functional than either one of them could do by themselves. Unfortunately, we only exercise and develop our intellectual side in our culture. We let the intuitive side go. So when we do try to pull out things on that intuitive side, we find it difficult. The intellect keeps jumping in the way, like Ingo was explaining to us. We don't trust that intuitive side. We think it sometimes gives us wrong answers because, well, we're not very good at it. We've never developed it. Fact is, if you spend time developing that intuitive side, it's just as dependable and just as accessible when you want it as the intellect side. But you have to develop it.
Thank you, Tom. That's very good.
Thank you, Gary, for your interesting questions, and I hope you'll join us again next month. Carolyn, if you'd like to go ahead with your question.
Hello. I have a question actually related to Gary's. I would like to know, how you can differentiate between, a longing that you have, a desire that comes from the intellect or from your being.
How can you tell the difference where it comes from? Is that the question, Caroline?
Yes.
So you know it's there. You're just not sure where it's coming from, whether it's something that you should just throw away because, it's just my intellect getting in the way, probably my ego, or whether it's something you should act on because it's a deep part of your inner self.
Exactly.
You will never know for sure. You will never really know for sure because as long as you have some fear, as long as you have some ego and some beliefs, then those will all be mixed in with your other thoughts, with the parts from your inner self, your intuitive side of where you are and what your core is. Who's the authentic Caroline? They're all mixed up together. The only way to work this problem is to get rid of that fear and to get rid of those beliefs and that ego, and then you become more and more authentic, and then the things that you feel are all you from at the core. But as long as you have fear, this other stuff's going to be there. As long as you have ego, this other stuff's going to be there, but you can't really separate it. You don't know. Now, you can think about it, but sometimes it's just confusing, because it's not the action. You can say, well, okay, I want to reduce my entropy and grow up, but that's about me. So is that ego? Is my wanting to grow up and my wanting to spend time on myself, getting rid of my ego, is that just ego talking to itself about getting rid of itself? You see, and pretty soon you can get all wadded up into a ball to where you just confuse yourself. The way to deal with it is use due diligence. That means you think about it, you care about that what you do is done for the right reasons. Think about that. Come to your best conclusion, even though there'll be uncertainty. There's always uncertainty. I tell you, live gracefully with uncertainty. But due diligence, that's D-O-D-U-E, due diligence, and then make your choice and live it. Then look and see what happens. So it takes courage to just do it and see what happens, see where it goes. And then you look at it after you live it and you say, well, was that a good choice or was that not a good choice and why? And now you have a lot more information to help you answer those questions of was it a good choice and why, because you've lived it. You see, it's not theoretical anymore. And then you'll learn from it and you'll say, well, all right, this part of it was okay, but this other part, that didn't work out so well. That was unintended consequences. All right, now you say, well, how did that come about? Why didn't I see that coming? And then you learn something, and the next time you'll do it better. So the only way to solve this problem is not to be afraid to act because you can't figure out what the right answer is to take your best shot, do it, live it, and then learn from it. That's how we grow up. We never grow up if we always sit on the sideline not knowing exactly what to do, so we don't do anything. We don't make a choice because you don't know if it's the right choice. And yes, those choices are major choices. They may cause you happiness or may cause you misery. They may make other people in your life happy or miserable. It's not that they don't have consequences. They do have consequences. And you're going to make a choice and let those consequences happen however they happen, deal with it, learn from it, and go on and do better next time. That's how life has to be lived. You can't sit and wait until you figure out exactly what the right answer is before you do anything, or you'll spend your whole life on the sidelines and won't learn much. So give it your best shot. Grab life and, give it a good shake. Go do it, live it, be it, and see where it takes you. And you can learn as you go. If you start down a path and it turns out it's got some sticky points, try to solve them. Yes, you could have gone down a different path that didn't have those sticky points, but you chose this one. Now try to learn from it.